So here's our Owens Valley talk. Don Burns has graciously offered to give a talk on flying the Owens Valley and demystifying it. So rather than get into any kind of long expose, I'm going to let Don take it away. Thanks a lot, Don.
All right, you bet. Thanks for showing up, everybody. I appreciate it. It's good turnout. I had originally targeted, and still have kind of targeted this talk at people who haven't been to the Owens yet, are thinking about going sometime either in the near future or in the far future, and just want to know a little bit about what it's about. I'm wondering, can we do a show? Is it possible to do a show of hands? Who here has already flown the Owens? Oh, well, okay, there we go. there's the video show of hands. Okay. Okay, cool. The Owens Valley is hands down my favorite place to fly. It is just amazing. It is beautiful. It's got tons of superlatives. It's the highest, the furthest. It's just incredible. I don't know. For a while there, I thought about trying to pursue a long distance record and going to Zapata or something. And to be honest with you, I couldn't imagine losing what I actually get at the Owens, to just go somewhere and thermal to the top of the thermal and race down to the bottom and thermal up and race down over flat ground. I could do that for a couple of hours and then I'd be pretty bored. But the Owens just offers you so much scenery, so many challenges, so many exciting things in a single flight that it's just, I think, the best place to fly in the world. So let's jump into it. What I'm going to do is, let's see, get my mouse here first. I'm going to give you a quick introduction. I'm going to give you a little Google Earth tour around the Owens. We'll talk a little bit about equipment that you need to have for flying the Owens. We'll talk briefly about weather, briefly about the skills that you should have for flying the Owens. I'm going to talk about driver skills as well. People don't think about the fact that your driver has to be skilled, but that's actually very important in the Owens. We'll talk briefly about no-fly days. They happen actually quite a bit in the Owens, so what to do on no-fly days. I've got some video clips. I'd like to kind of take you along and show you what the experience is like to launch from Waltz, to thermal up and fly over the Sierras. And I've got a nice climb over White Mountain and so forth, and then a little slide presentation at the end. Quickly, the Owens Valley, if you're not aware of where it is, for us in the Bay Area, it's kind of hard to get to because there's the only direct route is going right through Yosemite National Park, which it's a good 6-hour drive. And these days, I think it's even harder to get through Yosemite. There are alternatives, but it's a good 6-hour drive no matter what you do. If you end up going to Lone Pine, it's about a little over 6 hours to go down the south side. There's no direct route across other than, like I said, through Yosemite. So it's a bit of an effort just to get there. What our group usually does is we go and camp in the Sierras on our way there, and then drive the rest of the way the following day. And that helps us acclimate a little bit to the altitude, which is kind of an important thing. The Owens, I've heard people say the Owens is the deepest valley in the world. I don't know about that. It's certainly the deepest valley in the United States. Having grown up in the Andes Mountains, I kind of think it's not the deepest valley in the world, but it certainly is unique. It's got some amazing features. You've got Mount Whitney on the west side, which is 14,500 feet. Everybody knows about Mount Whitney. I think that is the highest point in the lower 48. And people go and they hike there, and it's a beautiful place. What people sometimes aren't aware is that right across the valley, we've got White Mountain at 14,250 feet. It's only 250 feet lower, but it's also extremely high. So we've got 14,000 foot mountains on both sides. The valley floor is 4,000 feet. So it's a 10,000 foot, vertical valley. The ranges are on the west side, you've got the Sierra Nevada, To the southeast, you've got the Inyo Mountains, and in the northeast, you've got the White Mountains. The Inyos and the Whites are separated by Westgard Pass, which is kind of an interesting gap to cross. According to some people, I've crossed it a couple times. It wasn't too hard, but anyway. There's a rule of thumb. It's 103 miles from Waltz, the launch at Waltz, to Janie's Ranch, which is at the very north end. We're going to do a little tour a little bit later. But a good rule of thumb is to multiply your hang gliding experience by 5. Your mountains, typically we fly mountains that are 1,500 or 2,000 feet high. You're flying 10,000 foot mountains. Your conditions, your thermals are going to be 5 times stronger. The lift is going to be 5 times stronger. The sink is going to be 5 times stronger. The distances you fly are 5 times stronger. And yes, the turbulence you fly in is going to be 5 times stronger than most of your experience, most of your flying experience. So that's a good rule of thumb to remember, times 5. I'm going to mention the tarantulas fairly often, and so I wanted to give a little introduction to what this is. Yeah, so we have a group. I've been going out to the Owens Valley every year for 28 years, with the exception of about 2 or 3 years where I couldn't make it. We have several people in our group that have gone over 30 years and some a little bit less, but we've got a group that meets from the Bay Area, from Fresno, from Utah. People come from Utah, and we've got this group, and somewhere along the way it got named the Tarantulas. Long story, I won't get into it, but we did discover one time that the high school mascot in Gabs, which is one of our really far goals, is a tarantula. So we figured to remain in the club, you had to fly to Gabs. With that, let me get on to Google Earth. And I've got a bunch of landmarks in Google Earth, and I would urge you to download them and use them and memorize them. You're going to hear me talk a lot about landmarks in the Owens, and I think it's important. So at least this gives you a good starting point for that. This is Google Earth, near and dear to my heart. This is the Owens Valley. The flyable part of it, as I said, is 100 miles long here, so it actually extends much further to the south. But a lot of this air down here is military and restricted. You can't get into it. Our flyable section starts from about where you see Owens Lake, this big dry lake bed, up north. We've got Lone Pine, a small town in the south next to the Alabama hills. As you go up the valley, there's a small town called Independence. Up closer to Bishop, you've got Big Pine, and then the big city in the Owens is Bishop. And so this is the big city. And it's roughly in the middle of the valley. It's actually a little bit further north in the middle. The road coming up the center is 395. It goes off and goes to Mammoth that way. Out the north end of town is Highway 6. So it gives you a little idea. What I want to do is give you a little tour of the launches. Let's start down at the south. It's the most well-known launch, I think, in the Owens Valley, which is Waltz Point. To get to Waltz, you leave from Lone Pine, and you go up this beautiful paved road, zigzags right up the top. There are many, many movies. Filmmakers love to film here in the Alabama hills because you've got great foreground hills with beautiful background mountains. And so you'll often see the Sierras in movies. And sometimes you'll even see this zigzag in movies if they didn't edit it out. Something that's kind of cool is if you come to the top, you come up here, this is where our launch is, and you see this motley crew of gliders on launch. Well, guess what? That's the tarantulas. We were lucky enough to get our picture shot as the Google Earth satellite went over, and I can prove it here. I've got a picture that my buddy Rick took up on top of this hill, and You can see the group of gliders here. The two guys here are not actually part of our group, but if you look in the background, you can see that you got the one glider next to the rock there. That rock's got a plaque on it that says Waltz Point. That's why we know it's called Waltz Point. This glider with the funny tips. And then this Millennium is part of our group. These two gliders, and this, if you know Paul Clayton, this is Paul Clayton's glider. Anyway, those gliders are all in this scene. Paul's is behind this bush. And the one glider that's missing is this one right here. This is Larry Fleming from Fresno. And he missed the picture on launch, but I went looking for him just to see if I could see where he was. And sure enough, he's over here thermaling up in the saddle. So anyway, that's kind of a fun thing. That picture came out in 2016 and it's still there. They haven't replaced it. So far, that's the tarantula group. This is an east-facing launch. So you need to take it in the morning. In the morning, the wind, the thermals will be forming in the valley and coming up the face of the mountain. So you're launching east face. If you wait too long, the westerlies can kick in and blow down. If you've flown other east-facing sites like Lake Elsinore or I can't think of any other right now, but Laguna Mountain in San Diego. These are east-facing mountains that are kind of morning sites. If you get skunked at Waltz, there's a launch across the hill. I'm going to show it to you just for historical reasons, but I believe it's closed now. Cerro Gordo is fairly well known from some of the old books. George Worthington's books, he would do a lot of his flights from Cerro Gordo. There's a small town, Cerro Gordo, and there's a guy that's kind of made a tourist attraction out of it. And I think he's closed the road to the top. So I don't think we can really fly there anymore. I've flown there once. The time that I flew there was blowing about 35 miles an hour. It was nobody else wanted to fly. I don't know why. Another place you can go if you get skunked in the south is there's a launch up the, if you take the road out of Independence and up this canyon, you take a right turn, you go to Black Eagle. Black Eagle is this little outcropping on the side of the mountain. This is kind of if you're new to the Owens, I would not recommend going here. It's a little bit rough. You're kind of launching into a canyon that can be kind of turbulent. The road is nasty. A friend of mine got 2 flats on that road one day. You've got one spare, but he got 2 flats. So that's a pain. That road also that goes up from Independence, you can also go left and end up at Mazurka. Mazurka is another launch in the Inyos on the south side of the east side on the south end of the valley. Mazurka is high, it's 9,000 feet. It's very exposed. I've never launched here, but they tell me it's a very flat launch. So I've been up there and seen it, but I've never actually launched there. If you cruise up the valley a little more, actually, you know what? There's no other launches on the east side except for Waltz. There's one way in the north. I put it up here. It's McGee Creek. And it's officially not in the Owens Valley anymore, but some great flights have occurred from McGee. But it is an east-facing site as well. So when we get into Bishop, there is a small flying site called Flynn's. And you basically, it's got a nice little road up to the top of it, and your landing area is right here. But just to give you an idea of scale, Flynn's is a 1,500-foot mountain. Okay, so these are big mountains. These are big mountains. You might think, I've never actually flown Flynn's, but you might think that, well, shoot, I can save myself the rough drive up the hill and just launch from Flynn's. But you got to remember your 5X factor. Launching from Flynn's and getting up is a little bit like launching from the 300 at Ed Levin and getting up. 1,500 feet in the Owens is low. you're unzipped, you're thinking about landing. A little further up um, we go north out of Bishop, following Highway 6. Uh, you go up this canyon and up the zigzag road, and you end up at Gunther. Gunther Launch. Gunther's been the site of actually a lot of competitions because there's a lot of room up here to set up and park and so forth. So you just park along the road and you set up, and everybody launches off of this little pad right here. Some people think that's a fairly shallow launch, and you are launching high. It's 8,000 feet, so there is that to consider when you're launching. One of my favorite places to launch, only because it's just kind of a, I've had some really fun flights here, is Paiute. Paiute is similar to Gunther in that it's 8,000 feet, a lot of room to set up and a lot of room to, it's got a great launch into the wind here. The road up it, though, has got to be the nastiest road that exists anywhere. It's full of shale. It leans over to the edge. When you got a car full of pilots and gliders on top of the truck, leaning 3,000 foot drop off to your side, it's a little disconcerting. But most dangerous part of the day is getting up the hill. And that's pretty much it for launches. We're going to come back and I'm going to do a little tour. We're going to do a flight starting at Waltz and ending up at Janie's. And so let's go do that now. My last flight this year, I did a little track of it. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in here just for reference so we can sort of see what's going on. But I'd like to give you some ideas of places to land, some tips on where to fly and so forth. Launch from Waltz Point. The trick to Waltz Point is you immediately turn right and get into the saddle. It's amazing. You'd think that, oh, I've got lots of room and lots of time to get up and should be really easy. And we've brought people out there for their first time before who are very experienced pilots and said, oh, I don't need to do that. I can just get up over here and I got lots of time. And they end up making up their own landing areas at the bottom. So you launch, you turn right immediately and get into the saddle, and the saddle gets you up. You want to cruise over to Winoga Peak, and Winoga Peak's about 10, launch is about 9,000, Winoga is about 10. And a good rule of thumb is get about 1,000 feet over that before you head north. Once you've got 1,000 over, you can head north. Actually, you head over one ridge over, usually that's a pretty doable thing. Sometimes you can't get up. So the landing areas to consider if for some reason you don't get up in this area is, the first one is, we call it the postage stamp LZ. You'd think, well, everything looks pretty wide open down here, but this is all kind of sloping ground. And these bushes, there's a lot of bushes and rocks and boulders. So this little area is kind of a flattened out area, and it's relatively small. It's not too bad, but there's no traffic on the road. So you can land on the road just as easily as you can land in the postage stamp, I think. I have landed on the road there once. If you have some altitude, if you've decided to leave the mountains and you've got a little bit of altitude, one of the really nicest landing spots is Lake Diaz down here. It's a big green grassy field. I think there's power lines on one side or the other. They're easy to avoid though, and you've got green grass to break down in. You got a lake to sit by while you wait for your driver and so forth. It's a nice place. They also let us land at Lone Pine Airport. The runway is out quite a ways out. So you've got the old runway, which is here, which is a great landable place for hang gliders. I've actually never landed at Lone Pine Airport. Let's get back to the mountains. If you get back up here and you're starting to make some headway, and I will say that the time between Waltz Point and Whitney Portal is usually slow. It feels slow compared to the rest of the Sierras. You're early in the day, the thermals are a little bit lighter, you're not getting as high. and you're working. Tuttle Creek is a call out for your driver. I'm at Tuttle Creek at 11,000 feet, and you keep going, so forth. Here's Whitney Portal. This is Mount Whitney up here, and Whitney Portal. This is the road that hikers come up. They park their car and they'll do the hike up to Whitney. This is a great crossing here, and on this particular day, I went deep. I was just having fun with it. I wasn't in a hurry, so I went ahead and meandered back towards Mount Whitney, but that usually feels pretty deep when you're back there. So normally you're just crossing from here to here. This peak works quite well to get up on. And this is the place you want to make a stand, because this is decision-making time. If I pull back out, we can look at some of the landing areas that you can get to from here. This area is it slopes down. It's got ravines and boulders. It's very landable, but it's not that comfortable. If you get out towards the road, there's places that are flat and even grassy. This is a nice green grassy area, but it does have high tension power lines, so it's good to try to avoid that. A great place to land is Manzanar Airport. Manzanar is actually also a very good landmark if you want to tell your driver where you are. We do that. Sometimes we give our landmarks adjacent to the road. So even if I'm up here north of Whitney, I'll either call in that I'm north of Whitney, or I'll say I'm at Manzanar. It lets your driver know relatively where you are along the trek. But here's what you want to avoid. This area between Whitney Portal and Onion Valley, this is not retrievable. If you end up hitting sink and going down in here, you're probably going to walk out, because there's no roads up there. There's no way to get there. So you need to make a decision here. I'd say give it a minimum altitude that you allow yourself to get to before you leave the mountains and head for the road. And that's probably 9,000 feet, which is about launch altitude. I don't think I feel comfortable going much lower than that at Whitney Portal. If you can get up, you want to get to the spine. The spine it's broken along the top, but the nice thing about it is there's areas like this where it's really nicely defined. And you know that if you're on the west or you're above the spine, you're not going to suffer from the westerlies when the westerlies start to blow, because the westerlies will come in on a normal summer day. Onion Valley is another place to call out. You always want to call out your position and altitude. This is Dawn. I'm at Onion Valley. I'm at 14,000 feet, proceeding north. Really beautiful here. Look at the lakes. Just awesome. Just amazing place to fly over. Just absolutely beautiful. I'll actually have a little video clip of this a little bit later that you can see flying right over this area. Another couple of landmarks is if you get forced out of the mountains, and that does happen fairly regularly in here, because this is the time when the westerlies start to blow through. It's possible to get pushed out. There's a good spot to land called the rest stop. And the rest stop it's what it is. It's a little rest stop next to the road. Good place for your driver to go. But make sure you can make it, because this is all lava. They're big, sharp lava rocks. You don't want to land there. All of this lava rocks. So anyway, you can get around it, but the rest stop is a nice place to go. The car can come right up to the fence, and you can throw your glider over the fence and so forth. So it's a nice place to go. If you're north of the rest stop, you're beginning to think about the crossing. Typically, what you do in the Owens is you fly the Sierras until afternoon starts to set in and the westerlies start to get stronger, and then you cross across the valley. And Tinnemaha seems to be the popular place to cross. Or Birch. Some people go as far as Birch, but one of the ways to tell where you are is there's these cinder cones out in the valley. There's a large cinder cone and a small cinder cone, and you can use these for reference to your driver. I'm at the small cinder cone. I'm at 14,000 getting ready to cross, or 16,000 getting ready to cross. And then your crossing is going to go straight over to black. That typically is followed by a lot of sink and a long time waiting to get over. Now, you might notice that I go a little further north. This is my own secret crossing. Don't tell anybody. But I like to stay high. I like to stay deep. And I like to get all the way up to the Palisades Glacier and then cross over Coyote Flats. This was not a good day to do this, by the way, because the wind was very south. When the wind is somewhat southwest or west, this is a great way to cross. Otherwise, it's not that good. You notice I landed just north of Bishop here. I also got sick in this flight. I mean, not nauseous. I got strep throat hit me in this flight, so I had to go land. I had to cut my flight a little bit short. So the typical crossing leaves here at Tinnamaha, and you fly through sink. You're calling your driver, give me ground wind, give me ground wind. I need no ground wind. And you get over here, you cross across the Owens River, and there's only one time that I've actually gotten over and gotten up on black, and even that time I lost it after I left black. It seems inevitably you get stuck down low, and by low I mean 3,000 feet off the ground. That's really low in the Owens. You're at 7,000 feet over flat ground, burbling in these 100 to 200 foot per minute thermals, really, really light or less, 50 to 100 foot per minute thermals. And you just kind of drift your way north. This is all landable. It's all flat. Big Ears, by the way, is a bunch of satellite dishes out there. That's why we call it Big Ears. It's kind of cool. It's a good place to go look around to if you have some free time. But this is all real landable. You just kind of stick with the road. Your driver's gonna come up the highway to Big Pine and then take a right turn into Westgard Pass, and then right after the river, he takes a right or left turn here and can just follow you along. So all of this is, you can just burble along, and I call it Burble Alley. Usually you get about adjacent to Bishop and it starts to build. This is typically where you start to get up. So by Flynn's, you're climbing and you're starting to fly into the mountains. And at this point, you're calling out your position. I'm 11,000 at Flynn's and climbing. You know, I'm just past Laws at 12,000 feet, climbing. I'm at Gunther, 13,000 feet, going north, so forth. So you have Gunther launch, Paiute launch as a landmark. I've got a couple of other things. Chalfont is a little small town out here. If you are north of Paiute, not sure quite how to tell where you are, you can say I'm just around Chalfont. Okay. As you get up to this ridge, this is a big canyon to cross. It's just south of White Mountain, and there can be some sink there. So you want to get some lift here and make this crossing. Now, this I believe to be the strongest thermal in the Owens Valley. It happens right here at White Mountain. If you look at the topography, you've got these ridges that come up and meet from all sides. They're just coming up from every side. And they all meet and they come up and they come up this little ridge right here and break off right there. This is a very powerful thermal. It's a very, very powerful thermal. When I was kind of new at the Owens, I would push out. I go, this is great. I'm going up, push out. Well, White Mountain has flipped me over twice. And I don't mean, I did not get flipped over as in tumbled flip over. It's more of an over the falls kind of thing. It's very powerful lift, very powerful sink on the outside of the thermal. My flipped over was more of a over upside down, falling, glider recovers, put your tail between your legs and yelp your way out of there. So anyway, but that's this is the strongest thermal I think I've experienced is right here at White Mountain. If you know how to fly it, and then now when I approach it, I talk to it. I say, "Be good to me," and I fly it at 40 miles an hour. I just keep the bar in as I go around in circles. It's a great big thermal, so you don't have to push out. Proceed on north. Some more landmarks are the alfalfa fields. There's nothing really of significance along the mountains here to tell your driver where you are. So we often say I'm at the north end of the alfalfa fields. And then there's a Waterski Lake. Yeah, seriously, it's a Waterski Lake. Somebody built a Waterski Lake out here. It's completely artificially man-made lake to go back and forth in water skiing. So we use that for a landmark. Tell your driver I'm at the Waterski Lake. Typically, you're at the south end of Pelsier Flats. Most of the time that I've flown this, it's almost like ridge soaring. There's just lots of great lift. You just kind of cruise, get some altitude to make the crossover to Boundary Peak. Boundary Peak is another very powerful thermal. You can see again, there's many ridges that come together, and I have been the highest here at Boundary Peak. This is where I've gotten the highest, and partly that's because I'm trying to get as high as possible to head out into Nevada. But I've been to 20,000 feet there several times, once to 21,000 feet. So it's a great place to get altitude. We're not going to go out into Nevada. We're going to take Boundary Peak and we're head down to Janie's. So I want to turn the borders on and show you where the California-Nevada boundary is. So on this side of the boundary, you're in California, crossover, you're in Nevada. Guess what the first thing you come to in Nevada? It's a bordello called Janie's Ranch. Janie's has been closed for decades now. It's just a shambles. It's a ruins and kind of just a mess. But in its heyday, they built it with a runway. I guess they assumed people would fly out there to enjoy Janie's. Janie's is gone, but the runway is kind of sort of still there. So we love that. I don't think I've ever landed here. I've landed here many, many times. I don't think I've ever landed here that the wind wasn't coming straight down the runway. So anyway, it's a great place to land. It's a great place for your driver to catch up and pull up off and pick you up. So that's that. That's the tour. That's the tour of the Owens. Let's talk about equipment. I'm going to ask a question. Does anybody know what the most important piece of equipment is in the hang gliding equipment in the Owens Valley?
Water.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. I'd say there's something more important.
Spare down tubes.
That's
O2.
Radio.
that is if you want your trip to last longer than one flight, yes.
Oxygen.
We're going to talk about oxygen, but that's not the one I'm thinking about.
Toilet paper.
Now, the most important thing is your radio. This is really the most important piece of equipment that you have, because without it, you're going to get lost. I mean, think about it. Your driver, this is not a flying site where you have a designated landing area unless you decide it to be that way. If you're going to do any cross country whatsoever, you're going to get lost without a radio, and they're going to lose you. It's very disconcerting to a driver to not be able to be in touch with the people that he's looking after. So know your protocols, save your batteries on your radio, don't chat on the radio. use the radio to give your position and altitude, and then know your landmarks. Know your landmarks really well. So download these landmarks that I'm giving you and memorize them and understand where you are on your flight. You want to give this is dawn. I'm at White Mountain Peak at 16,000 feet. If your driver knows your location and your altitude, gives him an idea of how quickly he's going to need to get to you, if you're going to be landing anytime soon, if you're going to be going north, so forth. So very important. Variant altimeter is good, but the most important part of that is your altimeter. Telling your altitude is a real important part of your reports. Water, yes, water got mentioned, very important. Have a Camelback in your harness, and also throw a bottle of water in your harness as well. You never know how long it's going to be till somebody picks you up. You can land out in the middle of the desert. It is the desert. It is hot. It is dry. So water, you can never have too much water. Well, I guess you could. You'd have too much water. Bring out a little first aid kit. This is mine. It looks a lot like the picture. And in that first aid kit, I carry a space blanket. Just rolls up like this, a little tiny thing. But, if you ever end up having to spend the night, and I never have, I've never opened the space blanket in 28 years of flying. But if you ever have to, there, you have it there. On this list, I have another item that will show up later because it's out of order. But I have a little mirror. I carry a mirror with me. And that goes into my first aid kit. And that has saved me. This one has actually saved me. I landed far off the road one time. I was in radio contact with my driver, but they didn't know where to begin to look for me. I tried to describe where I was, but I got my mirror out and I flashed it towards the road, and they saw me immediately, so they knew where to get me. Smoke bombs. When you launch, you're going to be in completely different air than where you land. You just have no idea what the wind's going to be doing where you land, and it's not a bad idea unless you've got a crack driver, which I've enjoyed some really good drivers. But if you've got a crack driver who can be there and tell you what the wind's doing on the ground before you get there, having a smoke bomb to drop and see exactly what the wind's doing on the ground is a good thing. And then there's the mirror. All right, oxygen. Let's talk about oxygen. So I'm going to provide a disclaimer here and tell you that I am not the right person to give you advice on oxygen. And the reason is I don't use oxygen. And certainly general aviation folks will tell me that that's so dangerous and so bad to do at these high altitudes and so forth. But I don't use oxygen. I think it's really has to be an individual choice about using oxygen. You've got to know how you react in altitude. I think oxygen is a really good thing for people who have a tendency towards having problems at high altitude. You need to have your decision-making skills. You need to have your wits about you. I've heard people getting hypoxic as low as 14,000 feet. And in my case, I know I probably am somewhat hypoxic over 18,000, but I've been to 21,000 without really a problem. And I will say I did grow up in the Andes, and I did grow up at high altitude, and that may have something to do with it. But so far, it's really not been a problem for me. But I'm gonna take myself out as being the person to give you advice on oxygen. I think you should read up on it. You should find out how your body reacts to altitude and make a decision based on that. You don't have to be, you don't have to go to really high altitudes. We actually work to get up. So what you can do as you begin to fly the Owens is choose an altitude that you're not going to go over. Just say, I'm not going to go over 14,000 feet, or I'm not going to go over 15,000 feet, and then see how your body works with that. Be aware that you will go hypoxic without knowing that you're hypoxic. You know who will know if you're hypoxic or not? Your driver. The driver, you can hear people get hypoxic when they start to slur a little bit, they start to slow down, they're talking or whatever. So anyway, oxygen, that's my spiel on oxygen. I didn't mean to leave it last on the list because it is important. But again, I will self-disqualify myself as an authority on it.
I'd like to say something about oxygen. Every one of those sailplane pilots flying in the Owens is on oxygen 100% of the time. And I would really strongly recommend that anybody who's going to fly a hang glider in the Owens really seriously look at bringing some oxygen along.
So I should reveal that I'm an emergency doctor and actually studied the hypobaric medicine a little bit. And so I will comment that there are some people who get hypoxic at 10,000 feet. In fact, you can get mountain illness and get sick at that low altitude. Some people are really quite sensitive to low altitude. Other people have more robust reaction to it. The challenge is that you can't tell. When you put people in hypobaric chambers and you take them up to 20, 25,000 feet and you talk to them, they think they're fine. And then you ask them to do very simple tasks and discover they can't. So that people don't know when they're getting hypoxia. You can't use the fact that you feel fine as a measure. But I mean, the sort of good news is that if you really lose your cognitive abilities, you can't find the lift anymore and you kind of come down. But judgment is clearly impaired. And the other thing is it gets cold. And if you're low on oxygen, you'll be much colder. So people that use oxygen not only see better, have better color vision, better cognition, but they're also warmer because they're able to, the body metabolism is not being slowed down by being low on oxygen. Having said all of that, I can tell you that last year or the year before last, I went out and flew up to 17,000 feet. And I didn't carry oxygen because I'm not used to, I don't. Although when I fly an airplane, the FAA says if you're above 12,500 feet, you must by law as the pilot, you must be on oxygen for sustained flight at even that altitude. So it's clear there is an effect. And as you're saying, Ken, it's a really good idea if you're planning on being above 14,000 feet. I'd certainly strongly recommend people wear oxygen, particularly if they don't have personal experience knowing how their body responds, because it's not pleasant to lose and you talk to people, you mentioned this, Don, you talk to people on the radio, you can tell from their voice, they don't even realize they're slurring their speech and slow to respond, and they're actually hypoxic.
The military requires it at 10,000 feet.
I had a comment on hypoxia in the Owens. If I stay less than 10,000 feet above where I've slept the past week, I'm okay. So it's very different rules if I drive there from sea level than if I've been there for 10 days. There's a big adaptation. You have to get some feel for where your body is.
Yeah, there's an immediate response, 1 to 2 weeks. Your body elevates your level of 2,3 DPG, which increases the oxygen, changes the oxygen dissociation curve for your hemoglobin, makes it possible for you, it acclimatizes you to high altitudes. But it takes more than a week. So you're absolutely right. I used to camp out at Horseshoe Meadows for exactly that reason, as a method of trying to get more acclimatized to fly during the day.
Let's talk weather. Here's the thing about the Owens Valley. You can be the best weather predictor on the planet, and the Owens Valley will embarrass you. It makes its own weather. It's unpredictable. It is really unpredictable. I've seen it overdevelop when it's high pressure everywhere else in California. I've seen it high pressure out there when it's thunderstorms other places in California. So it really has its own sort of cycles, and I haven't found a really good way to predict what the weather is going to be like out there. You just kind of have to go and feel it. Typically what we do is we get up in the morning and when we look at the sky, we go, do we want to fly waltz tomorrow? That means an early start. So we look up, we see, are there any clouds forming in the early morning? If there are, then you might not be able to fly. You might not be able to fly waltz anyway, or might not be able to fly anywhere. These are decision-making clouds early in the morning. If they're early cumes, not a good sign. You want to check the drift. You want to make sure that, are the clouds coming from the east? That's actually a little bit of a better sign. Are they coming from the west? Are they coming from the south? There's a lot of no-go days. I've gone out on 10-day trips and only flown, 3 or 4 days of the 10 days that we've been there. It happens 50% of the time. Sometimes it's just it overdevelops, and you've got to go find something else to do. Things to shut you down. If you see dust in the valley, that's air you don't want to land in. Don't launch. If you're on launch and you see dust in the valley, don't launch. You see overdevelopment, of course, or storms, stay out of that air. That's scary air. You can get up to Waltz and look for it to be, if it's downwind, you can't launch anyway. But often it'll be coming up at launch, but blowing down up higher. Remember, you're going to launch and you're going to climb. And when you climb, you're going to be in the air that's higher than where you are. So there are streamers up on the mountain at Waltz that you can check to see what the wind's doing up higher, and make good decisions there, because I've launched when the wind was blowing down up high, and it gets downright scary. When it comes to weather, I think the best thing to do is watch the trend. If you're out there for a few days, you go, what did it do day before yesterday? What did it do yesterday? What is it today? It's probably going to follow this trend. So that's one of the good ways to look at it.
Don, quick question on weather before we move on. Dust devils, are those particularly common there?
Yes, dust devils are common. They're good and bad. They're mixed. I have mixed emotions about them. They're good if you're high and you need to find lift. They're a good indicator of a very lifty area. They're really bad if you're landing, but they're obvious. They're really obvious in the Owens. The other place that dust devils is a problem is on launch when you're setting up. You can be setting up and have dust devils come up and take your glider and pick them up off the ground and stuff. So yeah, dust devils are pretty powerful in the Owens sometimes. Waltz doesn't really suffer that too much. I think you really get the dust devil activity more towards the north part of the valley, although it certainly can happen out in the valley in the south part as well. But typically, if you're doing this flight from the south to the north, the place you'll find dust devils more is in the northern part of the valley, and certainly out in Nevada if you go out into Nevada. So the White Mountain sites like Gunther and Paiute, these are afternoon sites, and so it's common for you to get dust devils rolling through while you're setting up. It's kind of disconcerting to see your glider fly up and turn into a little ball while you're setting up. All right, yeah, good question.
I'd like to make one final comment to underscore a couple of things you said, because you described it in various ways, but just to emphasize, the Owens is an amazing place, but it's incredibly variable. I've been out there flying in a single surface Gemini and got to 17,000 feet and flew 50 miles up the range, and every thermal was as big as a city block, and you couldn't fall out of them, and the thermals were like 1,000 feet, just perfect. It was just fantastic, and like a Hang 2 could have done it. And the same place the very next day can be like the most turbulent, the most dangerous, if you try and fly, you are likely to kill yourself. And it's not obvious if you don't know the place. And so your point about going with someone who knows and understands the valley is really important. I mean, I once flew off the Waltz Point on a day when I thought it was fine. I'd camped in Horseshoe Meadows and the wind was blowing up gently, not knowing that it was blowing 45 to 50 miles an hour out of the south above the ridge, which was completely blocked from launch. And the reason nobody had driven up from the valley was on the valley floor, it was blowing 50, gusting 10 miles an hour, gusting to 50 on the ground. And anybody who launched was out of their mind. And I wasn't smart enough to know that you needed to get the weather report from the ground or talk to someone on the ground before flying. And the place can be really, really dramatic. Looking up, if you see the clouds are doing this, above you, you know that that's just a day you don't want to be taking off. And the people that have been there and experienced it can describe that to new people. And so if you're going to go out for the first time, I'd recommend you have someone with some experience in the valley to give you some guidance about when it's safe and appropriate to fly.
Clouds that do this are a lot of fun to watch on a hike. It's a hiking day. Let's talk about Owens Valley skills. Basic skills. Man, you need to have a very strong launch. Remember, you're launching at altitude, usually in heat. And sometimes it can be very light wind, coming up the face. Your launch has got to be good. You've got to have a very strong launch. And these are skills you need to do some self-check on for yourself, That's the thing about the Owens. It's not regulated. There's nobody out there to shut you down. People can do as crazy things as they want to out there. So you really have to be self-checking on all of these skills. I like to say that the site is self-regulated. So if you go out there and you're not ready for it, it will let you know. I put here adaptable landings. That means don't go out there thinking you have a good landing because you have a good landing at your local site most of the time or all of the time. You never know what kind of air you're going to land in. It's always different than the air you launch in. So you need to be adaptable. You need to know how to land in very strong winds. You need to be able to know how to land when there is no wind and you're landing at 7,000 feet and it's 100 degrees on the ground. I think those are some of my scariest landings is when it's just dead and you've got density altitude that can have you screaming along the ground as you're coming along. Oops. Check your decision-making experience. You need to be able to back down from things that are a little bit iffy. If you're just a go-for-it person, be careful. The Owens can bite you. And your thermaling skills. I would say that, and I'm kind of just pulling this out of the top of my head, you should probably have, before you go to the Owens, you should probably have at least 100 hours of inland thermal site experience. And I don't mean Mission. That's not an inland site. I mean, McClure or Dunlap or any of the Sierra sites. I would get time getting really comfortable thermaling there. And even with 100 hours at these thermal sites, I would be very careful about the conditions you choose to fly in at the Owens. It can be really nice. It can actually be very, very comfortable and easy to fly there. But you need to be comfortable. You need to know how to handle yourself in the thermals. Question: what do you do in severe sink?
Speed up.
Speed up. Yeah. You will get severe sink in the Owens Valley. Severe sink happens. There are times when you just want to beat your Vario up because it's just going boop, boop, boop all the time. Shut up. Bump tolerance. Anybody know what bump tolerance means? It means how comfortable are you in turbulence? Do you fly tense in turbulence? Do you fight turbulence? You need to be doing these thermal flying sites to see what your reactions are. Do you roll with the thermal a little bit, or are you fighting it? If you're fighting it, this is not a good place to be fighting. You need to get more experience with inland thermal sites. There's a couple of different types of turbulence. One is the thermal turbulence, which is strong updrafts next to strong downdrafts, right? So, and flying near the edge of a very strong thermal. The other one is mechanical turbulence, which is wind coming over the Sierras and the westerlies. You get rotors and eddies, and that's unpredictable turbulence, and that's a bit more scary actually for me than the thermal turbulence. Got to ask yourself this question: are you willing to be in air that may tumble you? Now, I don't mean to scare anybody away with this, because you may fly for years and years and years and never encounter a situation where the air is strong enough that it may tumble you. But that air exists in the Owens. So you need to be willing. I have to say, after being flipped upside down a couple of times, it sort of takes away the, once you've been through it, you go, well, I think I'm okay with it. But yeah, you kind of have to ask yourself that question, because there is air that can do that to you. So this is a good example of adaptable landings. This in the Owens Valley, by the way, is a good landing. Notice the down tubes are intact. There's still water in the harness and so forth. So it's hard to get a graceful landing in the Owens. That is truly how it is. So anyway, next topic, driver skills. Yeah, you can't, don't take your friend out to drive for you who's never seen hang gliders before. This is not driving the car down from the top of the hill at Mission or something. This is somebody who needs to have very good skill and experience and understanding what hang glider pilots need when they're flying cross country. Again, the radio protocols. On the radio, the driver needs to announce to all the pilots that they're leaving launch, what they're doing. Leaving launch, stopping for drinks, getting gas, provide regular wind reports. Got to the bottom of the hill, wind is south at 5. I'm in town now and the flags show south at 10. So regular wind reports. Ask for position and altitude every 15 minutes or so. I'm back in the car. Can I get everybody's position and altitude? Know the landmarks. You got to understand. You got to be speaking the same language the pilots are. So you got to make sure you know the landmarks as well as the pilots know them. Keep track of your pilots. There's situations where people, more than one party will show up at Waltz and they'll trade radio frequencies, and then it becomes kind of confusing to the drivers. Well, who do I pick up and who don't I pick up? No, you need to have actually a nice set plan where each of the people in your group stay on one frequency. You can have 1 or 2 car chases or whatever, but make sure that each driver knows who they're responsible for. As you drive, you need to know who's in the lead and who's trailing. So you got to pick up the trailers, but don't lose your lead. It comes once in a while. You might have to have the case where you throw a trailer, a bottle of Gatorade and say, "See ya," and you go chase your lead because your lead is so far ahead. Times when we're flying out into Nevada and we get beyond the range, and the driver needs to be able to get up to the end of the north end of the valley and stay in radio contact with you. If you lose that contact, it gets pretty disconcerting. Keep ice and drinks, keep the cooler full. Timely arrivals, try to be there early enough to provide wind for your pilots. Did I point Benton out to you guys?
Nope.
Sorry about that. Let me see. I'll bring this over. I still got this at Janie's. Benton is right here at the north end of the valley. It has a gas station. It is the last, if your pilots end up going north into Nevada, it's the last gas station you're going to see. So don't leave Benton without a full tank. Okay. Oh, what to do when it's not flyable day? Oh, there's so much to do. I love the Owens. There's so many great things to do. You can visit the Bristlecone Forest. There's the Champion Spark Plug Mines. This is a great day hike. You climb up, I think, a couple thousand feet, and there's this old abandoned mine, which is now sort of taken over by hikers, and it's a really comfortable place. There's a kitchen, and people bring and leave food there and stuff, and it's kind of a lot of fun. There's some great petroglyphs to the north side of Bishop. You can see There's tons of ghost towns like the one in this picture that you can go and explore. There's mines. You can go get yourself in trouble climbing down a mine somewhere. There's beautiful Sierra lakes and hikes. So all kinds of stuff. You can go swim or raft down the Owens River. And the Keogh Hot Springs, actually, the Keogh Hot Springs are good for even on fly days because you go soak in the hot springs at the end of a good flying day. So there's a lot to do out there. There's really a lot. I mean, this is just the beginning list. There's so much more to do. It's good to, keep this in the back pocket so that you can, if it turns out to be a no fly day, you're not disappointed. You don't just sulk. There's a lot of stuff to do. All right, I got a couple of video clips I'd like to show just to give you an idea of what it's like. I'm going to talk through it a little bit. This is the launch at Waltz. Nice steep launch. It's great. Notice turn to the right and go to the saddle. That's the first thing you do immediately. I'm hoping that this video will give you a little bit of an idea of what the air is like as well. So you can see this is not a very turbulent day, actually. This is a fairly common average day, I'd say, in the Owens. So there's Mount Whitney. It's just beautiful. That's Whitney Portal flying over there. And there's a nice glide across that valley to get up on the ridge that's just under my right wing there. And then getting up on the Sierras, it's just absolutely beautiful. This is taking the time to get up on the spine. There's just no views like this anywhere. It's just amazing. When you think about it, all other forms of aviation just are not quite what hang gliding is. You get to get really close, right up close to the mountains. Even hikers, they get the views, but they don't get to see it from the air. If you're in an airplane, you do get to see these views, but not up close to the rocks. And we get to do things like experience, like watching your shadow come up one side of the spine and then down the other side as you cross over it. Just being up really close to the mountains, it's just amazing. There are people who fly paragliders in the Owens, but I've never seen, maybe with one exception, this last time, I've never seen a good launch at Waltz by paragliders. It's always scary. This is the road up to Paiute, just to give you a little taste of what it's about. It's shale rock, and it kind of leans off to the side. And this is a little climb at White Mountain. Listen to the Vario.
You don't even have to hear it because you can kind of see the ground falling away from you.
This is White Mountain. This is that really scary big thermal I was talking about. It's actually being pretty mellow at this altitude. The scary part is down lower. You guys probably couldn't hear me, but I said 16,000. There's the alfalfa fields out there. And back there's Chalfont. So Paiute will be almost straight ahead right now. It's looking south. And come around looking into Nevada. So looking to the north now, you see the Pelsier Flats.
What's your rate of climb here, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't really look at the numbers on the Vario, but I have, back when we used to have needles, we used to talk about pegging the Vario. But it's common to get 1,500 or 2,000 feet per minute up.
Wow.
sometimes it's just momentary. You get, a turn or so at that rate, and it slows down or something. $17,000.
You're headed to the flight levels, Don.
One. Oh yeah, headed for the flight levels. Not in this one. Okay, I'm getting towards the end of this. I've got one little other video clip, but I thought I'd throw some of these things up. I'm going to try to move. Well, let me talk about books to read. Thank you, Ken, for suggesting some of these. I got very inspired by George Worthington's book In Search of World Records back when I was an up-and-coming pilot. But there's several books. You kind of have to dig for some of these books to find them. I don't know, Ken, can you address the newsletters by Rick Masters?
This is a big, thick booklet, and I really don't have a mastery over how many issues there were, but anything either called XE Pilot, or there's also the Pilot's Guide to the Owens Valley. And that's also that's the Eastern Sierra Sport Pilot Association. I'm fairly sure that's Rick Masters. There's also another newsletter from that same group. And I've got one other item, which is the Owens Valley Competition newsletter, signed by Partridge, Krejci, and Mark Axon. So those were all written by people that more or less lived in the Owens. And in fact, if anyone ever comes across any of these documents, other issues, I would love to have them for my library.
I flew with a master's in the Owens and the XCPA in the mid 80s. And he had a series of newsletters in which he compiled the stories and the adventures of pilots as they were for the first time discovering what it was like to fly long distances seriously in the Owens. If you don't have them, I should probably go see if I can't find that set of original XCPA newsletters.
I would absolutely love those. And in the background, you can see the world's largest hang gliding library. So anything I don't have, I'm looking for. And if anyone's interested, I have brand new hardback copies of George Worthington's In Search of World Records that were given to me by his nephew, and along with some other memorabilia of Worthington's achievements. And by the way, just to emphasize again, I just saw Rick Masters. I'm sure it's all composed by him, but it's under USHPA Aero, which, if I'm not mistaken, that's our association's website. It had images of a dozen or 15 images of pages of writings from some of these booklets. So Masters was close to Partridge and Worthington and Krejci, so probably anything that comes out of those guys is going to be authoritative.
Final advice slide, and I've got some slides, and then I'd like to open it up to more questions here. So let's just wrapping it up. Make sure your self-check is working. Don't go early to the Owens. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to fly. It's an amazing experience, but be prepared when you go. Make sure you're introduced with someone who knows the valley. You don't want to go out there with a group of friends that have never been there before. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. So make sure you tag along with somebody who knows the place. Follow, don't lead. You get to launch, you're with a group and they decide not to fly, don't fly. Break down. The Owens Valley is self-regulated. If you don't launch with respect for the Owens, you will certainly land with respect for the Owens. Best to begin by respecting it when you start. Have fun, be safe, manage your risks. All right, here we go.
Try my best to improvise and take it all in as it comes. Can't let the little things linger in your mind, no. Not gonna waste any more of my time. Here for this moment, can't let it slip away. Gonna stop worrying about all the things I can't change. Breathe and regret, it'll never be too late. Find your serenity. Whoa. Sun is shining on my face, breathing in the wide open air. I ain't got no right to complain. We all heard our fair share. Oh, no. Here for this moment, can't let it slip away. Gonna stop worrying about all the things I can't change. Breathe and regret, it'll never be too late. Find your serenity. Find your serenity. Oh, no.
That's a really cool video. This content has been awesome. I saw a lot of topless gliders. Is that, are there lower performance double surface gliders that people fly there, or do you kind of suggest topless?
Well, we tend to go high performance in the Owens just because you need the speed, you need the glide, you need the so forth. You need the performance. But let's think about it. Some of the first records that were ever set in the Owens Valley were done in Seagull 10 meters, and we're talking about billow cruisers. So certainly you can fly just about anything. It's just the high performance gliders give you a little bit better margin should the wind pick up, should the wind be strong, and so forth. If you pick your conditions, I don't see what's considered a king posted medium performance glider today was actually a real high performance glider not that long ago. So
right.
I think most of your mid-range gliders today would do just fine in the Owens.
Yeah, they first flew it in standards.
Yeah, that's right. They didn't go very far in standards.
Chris Price and Don Partridge, they made their first flights there in standards.
If you were to launch at Waltz and land at Janie, roughly, I know it depends a lot on your route and everything, but roughly how many miles is that?
Waltz to Janie's is 103 miles.
Got it. Wow.
Yeah. Waltz to Janie's is 103. That's a great flight.
And how long does it take to fly from Waltz Point to Janie's?
On a really fast day, it's 3.5 or 4 hours. On a slow day, it can be 7 hours. Depends on the lift, depends on the conditions. I wanted for so long when I was first flying the Owens, I didn't have a 100-mile flight, and I wanted a 100-mile flight so badly. And I flew year after year, and every time I'd come away with an 89-mile flight or 92-mile flight, I was so mad. My first 100-mile flight, I was high above Boundary Peak, looking down at Janie's for an easy 100-mile flight, and I headed out into Nevada and actually went 181. So my first flight over 100 miles was 181 miles.
Fantastic. Any other questions?
Well, I want to ask, how do we organize a trip? next year, and are one of these more experienced pilots available to take us there as soon as the season opens next year? I prefer to learn on site and just fly and see.
Yeah, good question. We typically go in July. I think people would be fine if they want to join us. You know, we typically go mid-July because that is when we used to target that because that's when all the records were set in the early years. So, but it is when the days are long and the conditions are strong. You get the most flying days, I think, around that time. A little earlier in the year, you can get a lot of moisture and overdevelopment, and later things start to dwindle out. But yeah, so yeah, you can contact me, and if you want to come along.
Yeah, that sounds great. I did have one more question. I just thought of it now. That I have flown slide quite a bit, and people say that it's kind of like a small Owens Valley. What are your thoughts on that? How much does that experience carry over into flying Owens?
Yeah, that's not a bad. That's a good point. I think it's an east-facing site, and it's you got a thermal to get up there. You can't just. It's not a ridge soaring site. So, and typically a lot of cross country happens there along mountains in both directions, and so actually slide's a great place to prepare for the Owens. I think. Yeah, it's a good point.
Sounds good. We'll do some trips to slide before Owens then next year.
Cool.
Hey, Don.
Yeah.
Do you run into sailplanes in the Owens?
Yes, we do. It's a lot of fun. That brings up a good point. You know, we may go out as a group and we all launch and we never see each other again. The place is so big that you just never see each other. Often you'll call in, I'm at, such and such a place at such and such altitude. And I go, well, wait a minute. I'm at that altitude at that place too, but I don't see anybody around. So it's just really big. But sailplanes tend to be a little bit easier to see. They're bigger and so forth, and they're white. And but I've got some great experiences. I got to thermal up at White Mountain with a sailplane one time, and he dutifully leveled out at 18,000 and headed for the airport, and I kept going.
So it's easy for you to see the sailplanes. How easy is it for the sailplanes to see you?
Yeah, I don't know. Apparently this guy I thermaled with, he saw me because we thermaled together, but I don't know. That's a good question. Good question for a sailplane pilot.
I think I can answer that a little bit since I fly around hang gliders fairly, I wouldn't say regularly, but I do in airplanes, at least in the same vicinity. And it's the same problem that you have at Fort Funston, especially these new laminate color hang gliders. They just blend in like stealth. Like you really have to keep an eye out of what's going, or you have to keep a view out of the corner of your eye to spot motion to spot them. The Dacron solid color or multicolor type gliders, like Jessica's new Monarch, those gliders are fairly easy to see. But like these laminate sail T2s or the new T3s, they're nearly impossible, and it doesn't really matter what the background is.
And I am a sailplane pilot, and I fly in the Owens, and I can tell you that hang gliders are damn tough to see.
So what is a hang glider pilot to do about that? Stay out of the way.
You can't really do that. One of the best things I've seen on hang glider pilots is a little dangling like disco ball from the tail of the hang glider that reflects color and light in any direction you approach it from. So you're ripping along the whites doing 90, and you see this sparkly thing in the distance.
Some of the SoCal pilots have taken to putting hollow tape on the leading edges of the wing and also like on the king post or on the top sail. So that's probably useful.
Whenever I see a general aviation or a sailplane in my area, I will start to circle. I think if you circle, you're more apt to be seen than if you just stay still. So
I think that's a good point.
Don, I have a question from the offline gallery. What's the functional difference between, like, say, in field between 700 foot per minute up and 1500 foot per minute up?
Oh.
What would you say is the major difference?
Feels exactly the same.
Well, that's actually not, that's pretty accurate. I think it has, really, I think what you feel in a thermal has much more to do with the abruptness, if you will, of the thermal than the climb rate. The mental picture that you have when you're at the Owens is very similar to if you're flying Mission Peak. It just takes much longer to get somewhere, but you can be at 15,000 feet over White Mountain, and it looks like being, 500 feet over Mission. It looks the same size scale mountain and so forth. And so your climb rate is similar too. But if you happen to be in punchy thermals, or in, as you saw the one that was in this video clip, that was once the thermal was high, it was really kind of opened up and got smooth, and it was really not very punchy or turbulent. So yeah, I think it's pretty similar.
Don, I'd point out that in addition to your ears popping, when you're going up that fast, you feel the air getting colder on your face by the second. And that's quite a dramatic experience. The other thing I like to remember is that it feels when you fly into one of these monster thermals, the acceleration is so abrupt, and it really feels like the hand of God reaching down, lifting you, and just suddenly hurtling you skyward. The first time that happens is quite a remarkable experience.
Flicking you if you get near the edge.
Don, any final closing thoughts?
I think that's it. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you showing up and attending this. It's been a lot of fun. Been a lot of fun preparing it too. I had to go through a lot of pictures and videos, and maybe I had more fun than you did. I don't know.
No, this is really good. Like really, really cool content. So thank you.
Yeah, I think this is fantastic. It's one thing to see it in magazines and papers and stuff like that, but like this whole new wave of pilots, they didn't have access to that information. Like some of this stuff was published like even before I was in grade school. So it was like, unless we're willing to dig in an actual paper library, it's very difficult for us to have access to this knowledge easily. Once again, everybody, thanks very much, and we'll see you at the next talk.
Thanks again, Don. Great presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Don. That was fantastic.
Good job, Don.
Thank you.
Thank you.